Leaving no one behind is a cardinal principle underpinning the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, an agenda whose development and adoption Kenya is proud and indeed distinctively privileged to have led, as you have stated. Indeed, equality is enshrined in our own Constitution, and our Constitution does recognize, and I quote, that every person is equal before the law and has the right to equal protection and equal benefit of the law. Kenya has a very special guiding relationship in the 2030 Agenda and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Along with the Republic of Ireland, we had the honor to co-chair the final intergovernmental negotiations for the landmark and unanimous adoption of the SDGs at the United Nations General Assembly of 2015, and more importantly, to enforce a granular picture of inclusion, especially those at risk of being left behind. Indeed, to further this vision, our own 2010 Constitution embedded devolution, which aims to bring people closer to government, enable them to participate more directly in identifying their development needs and being engaged in the development process, but also to align government response to local needs and aspirations. Growth and equity must go hand in hand, and therefore the need for us to ensure that we have a stable economy. We are not going to be able to snap our fingers and think it's going to happen. And we must recognize that it is important for us to be able to focus on the two, not one at the exclusion of the other. With no growth, there is nothing to share. And that is something I believe people need to be able to understand. And that's why we must focus on both the need for us to grow the pie as much as we need to share that pie in a much more equitable manner. These two go hand in hand. And that is why peace and stability is important. And that is why we must recognize and focus that the key ingredient to everything that we're talking about here is inclusion, is peace, and is stability.
And the SDG's central transformative promise you see in front of you. It's the unequivocal commitment of all UN member states, Kenya, but the 192 others, to eradicate poverty in all its forms, end discrimination and exclusion, and reduce the inequalities and vulnerabilities that leave people behind and undermine the potential of individuals and of humanity as a whole. So that's what we mean by leaving no one behind. Usimwache yeyote nyuma. So why does LNOB, leave no one behind, really matter? So what can inequalities do? The first is that in Kenya, they could undermine our amazing, progressive, constitutional commitment to live in peace and unity as one indivisible sovereign nation. We have an extraordinary constitution, and eventually inequality can undo some of that wonder. The second is an economic point, Mr. President. Inequality can actually hold back further economic growth. You get to a certain point, and as my colleague from the World Bank is fond of saying, it's like the speed bumps on a Nairobi street. They slow you down. Inequality slows you down. And the third, eventually, if inequality gets too big, it can threaten national peace and cohesion. Next slide, please. So that's why we, with the government of Kenya, prepared this Leave No One Behind report, which we hope is a clear-eyed picture of those at risk of being left behind.